The Palais de Tokyo, the building has a long history. It was built in 1937 for a World Fair. And as an institution, we only exist since 2002, and we have been completely reinvented and also doubled our spaces in 2012. So the Palais de Tokyo as an institution is rather young, but as a building, it's rather old. So the current institution was opened in 2002 after first of all, the building which houses us was empty, and the French government decided that it needed to be filled with an institution that would fill a lack in the Paris art scene. So really a space that is entirely dedicated to showing exhibitions of contemporary art. And so the Palais de Tokyo was founded for that as a non-for-profit in 2002. 2012, we reopened indeed in a bigger space, even though it was in the same building, but also in a completely different legal position, because we were no longer a non-for-profit. We were a private company whose sole shareholder is the French state. So we are a private company. The people who work at the Palais de Tokyo are what we call in French salariés. They're not civil servants, but the owner of this company is the French state, and the French state is also the owner of the building. They also gave an institution the mission to fill the building and to organize both these exhibitions of contemporary art and to what we call in French mettre en valeur the building, so make the best use possible of the building. Also, underlying idea, maybe also make a profit from this building to the institution Palais de Tokyo that it created itself. So this company, limited traded company that is owned solely by the French state. We do a lot of things, but for the income generating, there is three main blocks. One block is that we have what we call concessions in French, but which definitely is not the English word. So basically, we rent out on a long-term basis some of our spaces to commercial operations. So there are currently at the Palais de Tokyo 2 restaurants. There is one bookshop, and there is one, very glamorous, nightclub. So these spaces are attributed to private companies that reply to a public tender that we publish every few years. So it depends on each of these different locations, but sometimes it's for 5, sometimes for 7, sometimes for 10 years, if I'm not mistaken. And so they occupy these spaces, they pay us rent, and they also pay us a percentage of their income. And these elements contribute a substantial part of our income. These three, because the restaurants are very big, the bookshop is very popular in Paris. And so they also contribute to making the Palais de Tokyo a more lively space, because of course they draw a lot of visitors. Then there's another block, which is what we call temporary privatization. So some of our spaces are rented out for short-term events. It can be like a corporate evening of sponsorship. It can be also a conference that is organized by a private partner. And so these events take place all year round. Sometimes the Palais de Tokyo is completely, like the entirety of our spaces are entirely dedicated to these events. Sometimes it's just small parts of the Palais de Tokyo. So it really depends, but this is also very important for income generating. And then furthermore, of course, there's our ticketing, which is important for our income generating. And lastly, corporate sponsorship, which in France is something very particular because there's a special law about this. That's the law, the Ayagon law. Back to when Jean-Jacques Ayagon was Minister of Culture, he instituted this new system of corporate sponsorship for cultural institutions, and that is also something that generates a lot of income for the Palais de Tokyo. So Ayagon was a Minister of Culture in the early 2000s, Jean-Jacques Ayagon. He used to be the president of the Centre Pompidou before, and he was the president of the Palace of Versailles afterwards. But one of the big innovations that were made under his Ministry of Culture was that a new law was voted that allowed private companies to subsidize in a way, or to bring money to cultural institutions, so museums, art centers, operas, and so forth, and that a substantial amount of this donation that they would make would be deductible from their income from their income taxes, and the other part that was not deductible from the income taxes should be counterbalanced by elements that they would be receiving from the institutions which they are supporting. A big part of this counterparts is visibility, as we call it. So it means that their name is written on posters or is written outside of the building, etc., etc. So there's visibility, but also they have access to tickets for free for their employees, or they have access to these famous spaces that we rent out so that they can have, for instance, for one evening, or they can have books or things like that. Our main position is, of course, to show the art creation of our time, both in order to make this creation accessible to the greatest number. How do we read our history as individuals, as societies, is by looking at the art productions in a very large scale. I'm talking about books, architecture, but also visual arts of the past, which relate what has happened back then and which say more than one could think about what happened back then. This is our role, is to produce, help to contribute to produce the identity of society in the future. By welcoming the greatest number possible. And we also have the mission to help the art world, which is a collective of human beings, of individuals, blossom and grow. So by contributing to the finances of artists, by contributing to the finances of people who have interventions at the Palais de Tokyo, be it external or internal. So we also have this social responsibility towards individuals who make up the art world. So showing art has a sense for people outside of the art world because it is a reflection of themselves and it says something about the world that they live in. So it is our obligation to make this accessible to them in the easiest possible manner. And it's also an obligation towards the people inside the art world because we are part of this system. So the financial flows that happen in this art world, we are part of it. We are a stakeholder and we have a responsibility that comes with this. And I hope that the Palais de Tokyo is efficient and generous as a stakeholder of this art world in showing the best possible art to the most diverse and biggest possible audience and contributing to the well-being of as many members of the art world as possible.